Hey everybody, how you going? Welcome back. Missed you guys so much. Have a good holiday? Yeah, good. I had a great holiday. Ah, I did. You did?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Awesome. Last year I had a birthday, and yeah, thanks. Anyone else have a birthday last year? Yeah, don't worry. And I was given a tent for my birthday, and so last October holidays, we decided to have this really special, spectacular family camping adventure. So my wife and my two kids, we went down to Port Elliot Caravan Park, and we got a nice little site right near the beach. And Claire takes the kids off to play on the playground, and I do the man thing and set up the tent. And brand new tent. First time we've ever used the tent, and I put it out there on the ground, lie it out all flat, put the pegs in. I'm doing everything textbook. And then I get the poles and thread the poles through the tent so it starts to take shape. And I'm starting to feel pretty good about myself because I have made a tent. And yeah, thanks. Anyway, I'm doing this, and right in the middle of doing that, there's this gust of wind comes through, just off the hills, and snaps one of the poles of the tent. Brand new tent, people. Yeah, feel it with me. Feel it with me. How am I feeling in that moment? Yeah, devastated. Yeah, we will talk camp stories in a moment, but this is my camp story. Yeah, it's all right. Anyway, so the tent just collapses. I'm thinking in that moment, well, there goes our holiday adventure of a lifetime. And anyway, I talked to Claire, and we're like, it's cool, I'll go to the shop. And the local shop there has a whole wall full of gaffer tape because everyone is buying cheap tents. And so I get a roll of gaffer tape, go back, and I fix up the pole as best I can. But it's nowhere near as good as it was. And we go to the beach, we have a barbecue dinner, we walk the kids along the beach at night. It's really nice. We get back to the tent, bedtime stories, we all snuggle in and fall asleep for an hour or two. And then this wind picks up again. And I'm not woken by the wind, I'm woken by my daughter screaming because the world is about to collapse in on her. And I wake up and I open my eyes, and the tent is just going whoo, 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 over the top of us. It's like this high, the tent, but it's hitting our faces and we're lying on the ground. And my daughter is freaking out, and I try and cuddle her and say, isn't this really exciting? Like, this is amazing. We're in a tent and it's dancing. It's dancing, Lily. She didn't buy it. And so after an hour or two of that, just trying to convince her, and Lily saying, I want to go home, I want to go home. We put her in the car, we put Elijah in the car and my wife in the car, and then I packed down this stupid tent and then put it in the boot, and we go home and get home before the sun comes up. And that was our camping adventure. But yeah, thanks. Anyway. The reason I tell you that is that sometimes it feels like life is just a cheap tent. And things are looking good for a while, but then a pole snaps and everything just falls to pieces. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but the older you get, every single year of life you live, everything seems to get a little bit more complex, a little bit trickier. Like schoolwork, obviously. But then relationships with people. And it's another year's worth of mistakes that you've made, or mistakes of other people that you've had to live through. And life just gets more and more complex. And you start to realize that sometimes it's not awesome at all, it's just this shaky tent. And before you know it, a wind's going to come and it's going to snap the pole, and you're just left screaming in the dark. What do you do when that happens? What hope is there when the tent pole snaps? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So this term, if you haven't got one of our calendars, we haven't been sending them out because we cost a lot of money these days. But if you want to get one, grab one at supper. We're looking at the resurrection this term. Like last term, we looked, like Ali said, at Jesus' death. And then we finished at the end of camp with Jesus' resurrection. And we're talking about that. And something really stuck with me out of camp that I haven't been able to shake is that Jesus rose from the dead. And I'm talking about how that changes so many things. And we just scraped the surface of that on camp. And I'm like, I want to spend a whole term talking about this. The resurrected Jesus and what it means for us. That if you've put your faith in Jesus, he's actually resurrected you as well. And there's so many awesome things that come out of that. And so as I was thinking and praying about what could we do this term and what kind of things can we tell you, I came to this passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And it's written by a guy called Paul. And this is his mission statement. He's saying, this is what I believe, so this is what I do. And this is one of the best chapters of the Bible. I've been reading it and rereading it and trying to memorize it over the last month. And I'm getting really excited about it. And this is a chapter to fire you up and get you amped for living for Jesus. And it's going to tell you all kinds of things that we have now, that we have a new hope, that's tonight, a new aim, a new perspective in life, a new mission, something to do with our lives, something to give our life meaning, a new identity, that who you are is all new now, a new strength, no matter what happens. But tonight, we're looking at a new hope. So, if you want to read in the Bibles there, you can grab one. It's on page 966. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, 966. And verse 1. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, that we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. How good is that? I'll say it again. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home, there's this body, there's this life, is destroyed, tent pole breaks, that we have a building from God. We have a building from God, a house not made with hands, a house that's not going to break, a house that's eternal in the heavens. This is a new hope, and it's amazing. Now, often when we talk about hope, right, we talk about something that we really want to happen, but we're not really sure whether it's going to happen. We don't have control over it. Like, I'm hoping to get into medicine, or I'm really hoping that girl is going to say yes when I ask her to go to formal with me. You know, it's a hope. Like, I don't really have control over it, and I'm really wanting it to happen, but it's just a hope. It's just a hope. And those are things that we can't really bank on. Unless you're Tim Cook, because the girl's crazy to turn you down for the formal. But to get what I mean, that's what we normally mean by hope. But this hope is not like that. This is a sure hope, something that we can bet on. It's not a flimsy tent pole. This is something that we can bet on. That we know that if this tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God. Paul is saying this is not I really hope this is the case. He's saying, I know this is the case. This is like a sure hope, something we can hang everything on. And once you get that, that what happens in your life, and what happens in your body as it starts to break down and disappoint you, as people around you in your life start to break down and disappoint you, that's not it. That's not everything. Your hopes don't hang on this. Your hopes hang on something so much better. How cool is that? And it starts to change everything. Because when we hope just on this earthly tent, this body that we have, this life that we have, that I really hope I get into the right uni course. I hope that girl will marry me or that boy will marry me. I hope that everything's going to work out for me and this life is just going to be sweet, because all our hopes are just hanging on this earthly tent. And I'm just hoping that one of the poles isn't going to snap and it's all going to come collapsing down. We don't have to hope like that anymore, because we have a hope way beyond that and way better than that. That we have a building from God no matter what happens with us. And God is never going to take that away from you if you put your faith in Jesus. And so then all the worries of right now start to disappear. All the stresses in your life, once you start to think about that hope, that it's not hanging on anything to do with me or anything to do with the people around me that seem to mess up and hurt me, but it's all to do with this hope that God has for me. I don't need to worry. I don't need to be stressed. I don't need to be anxious. And it all starts to disappear. Does that sound good? It's a new hope. I don't know, maybe some of you are thinking, well, it sounds really nice. It does, it sounds awesome. But how can I trust this? How can I trust this is not just someone writing this down? It's okay, everybody, don't worry. It's going to be good in the end. We're going to go to heaven. No matter what happens, it's going to be sweet. How can we trust that what Paul wrote there is actually true? Let me tell you one way that we can trust it is that this guy, Paul, didn't just write this to try and make people feel better, but he banked his whole life on it. See, Paul was this guy who hated Jesus, and he hated anyone who liked Jesus or said anything about Jesus, and he devoted all his time, every bit of energy he had, to shutting up people who love Jesus, to shutting down people who love Jesus. And he did this all over the place until one day he met Jesus. And this is weird because Jesus had died long before that. Who knows, weeks, months before it. But he meets Jesus, risen from the dead, and everything changes. Everything changes for him. And he goes from trying to shut people up about Jesus to telling everyone about Jesus. And he's risking his whole life for it. And he's willing to thrash his body for it. He says it's like, and he goes through all the things, we'll go through it in the coming weeks, all the things he goes through, being put in prison, going through shipwrecks, being robbed, being beaten and stoned and whipped and mocked and kicked out of cities and all kinds of horrible things. And he says, I'm just going for it. I'm just letting my body be thrashed because I know that it's not all about this. I want people to know that there is a hope beyond this broken body. So this guy, Paul, he writes, for we know that if this tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house made without hands, eternal in the heavens. He's not saying it to make people feel good. He's saying it because he's banked his whole life on it, because he met Jesus. And Jesus let him know that, and Jesus showed him, death is not the end, Paul. It's just the beginning. Let's get started. So Paul throws himself into it. You can trust these words. But then I was thinking about it today. Maybe some of you want to trust these words. But it's all a little bit too threatening. Because you've tried to put your hope in things people have said before. That you've tried to put your hope in people and they have let you down. And now you're just a little bit guarded about it, pretty cagey about it. Well, I was thinking about this with the whole Star Wars thing. Princess Leia, you know the hologram in the first movie? And she's saying, help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope. She's put all her hopes on this weird guy with a beard and a cloak in the desert to save her whole planet. What happens to her planet? Yeah, sorry, everybody that hasn't seen the movie. It gets exploded. She's put her hope in a person and he hasn't been able to deliver. She's disappointed. And that happens, that we put our hope in people to make us feel secure and happy and hopeful about life, and they let us down. And so maybe when you're hearing this stuff tonight, that you can have a new hope that will not be shaken, that you're a little bit cagey about it. If there was anyone who had any reason to feel ripped off by people, it was Paul. At the very end of his life, he's kind of old and he's beaten, and he said, my body is a tent and it's falling to pieces. his very last letter, he writes to a guy called Timothy. He wrote him 2 letters. So the second letter of Timothy. And in that letter, he names at least 7 people that have let him down. Some of them have let him down deliberately. Some of them have possibly let him down without actually knowing it. But Paul knows people will let me down. But do you know what he says right there at the end of that letter? He says, no one stood by me. No one stood by me. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me. So I want you to know, if you're feeling like, I want to live a hopeful life. This sounds awesome, but I've been burned way too many times. Listen to what Paul's saying. He's saying, I've been burned. I've been burned as well, and I feel it. People have not stood by me, but the Lord stands by me, and he strengthens me. And you need him. You need him. I was thinking about other people who would love to cling to these words but are feeling like they just can't do it at the moment. And I'm really feeling for you guys because some of you just aren't feeling it. And that worries you. Like, I've heard all this stuff, but I don't know, it's not really stirring my soul. It's not, right now life sucks and I can't get beyond that. And I really want to hold on to this new hope, but it's just really hard at the moment. Let me read to you what Paul says just before that. These are some of the sweetest verses of the Bible. He's talking about all the hard things that he's going through. And he says this, even though all that hard stuff is going on, that people are finding out about Jesus. And he says, so we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction, all these hard feelings that he's feeling, these light momentary afflictions he calls them, are preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. He's saying, what I'm feeling right here in the flesh, this dryness, this feeling of just being cold and alone and let down by people, he's saying that is nothing compared to what Jesus is preparing for me. This eternal weight of glory and this new hope that I have, that life doesn't end with this body, but it goes on with God forever. He's saying that makes all the difference. 2 amazing things out of that. Number 1 is that whatever you're feeling, that doesn't dictate how close you are to Jesus. You get that? However you're feeling doesn't dictate how close you are to Jesus. All that stuff that Paul was going through, Jesus was right there with him. Even though Paul felt at his lowest, didn't change how close Jesus was to him. You need to remember that. And Jesus was never going to let him go. No matter what you're feeling. If you've put your faith in Jesus, even if you're not feeling it at the moment, he's got you. And you can have hope in that. That's the first thing. The second thing, is there any struggles that you're going through right now? And I know people here are going through struggles. And it might be hard to get your head around this, but you just got to trust. Paul is saying that's nothing compared to what is going to come. That these are light compared to the weight of glory. The good stuff that God has in store for you that you can bank on, that you can have hope in. And no matter what you're feeling now, if you've surrendered your life to Jesus, he's got you. And he has this amazing hope for you. And you need to hold on to those 2 things. It doesn't rely on warm, fuzzy feelings. Like, I think sometimes people are hungry, and for good reason. For moments like on camp, we went up Prayer Mountain, and it was this sweet, sweet moment, and it was emotional, and people felt it. But we can't hang our hopes on that moment, on that emotion, because emotions come and go. But what remains is the truth of that moment, that we were surrendering our lives to Jesus in that moment. That our greatest hope is that God raised Jesus from the dead and that he will raise us also. and bring us into his presence. That is an awesome hope. Paul is saying, my hope isn't in this tent. My hope is in heaven. And so he went hard, not worrying about this tent. He thrashed his tent. He traveled all the way around the Mediterranean world telling everyone he could tell about Jesus. Because he said, my hope is not here. My hope is in something even better. And I want you to have that same hope too. And do you know why he could do that? Is Paul followed Jesus' lead. Jesus lived, had an earthly tent, and he gave it up for us. It collapsed for our sake. And he doesn't promise that our lives won't collapse at different times, that the poles won't break, that you're not going to have hard times. He doesn't promise that. But he does promise you a hope that will never, ever break, that will never fade away, that will never disappear. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. That is our hope. I really want you guys to hold on to that hope because it changes everything. Let me pray.